There's a dent on the hallway wall beside the thermostat. I've been staring at it for 33 minutes. It's not from a fight. It's not from anger. It's from a grocery bag that slipped from my arm last Tuesday while I was trying to carry everything in one trip like an idiot. A can of chickpeas rolled out, bounced once, and smacked the wall hard enough to leave a scuff. And I haven't touched it since. That's where my life is now, counting minutes in silence and memorizing scuffs on paint, wondering how many things I've let happen without reacting. She said she'd be gone for 2 nights. That was 12 nights ago. No text, no call, no excuses. Just an open drawer where her charger used to be, and her favorite shoes missing from the mat. The house still smells like her hair conditioner. I haven't run the dishwasher since she left because I keep thinking she might walk through the door and complain about how I load it wrong. But the doorknob never turns. I sleep on one side of the bed. I leave her pillow untouched. Last night I spoke to it. I said, "I'm sorry for being boring." And I meant it. I checked the bank app. A $47 charge from a wine bar in a neighborhood I've never heard her mention before. She left her location tracking on. I still have access. I think she forgot. I open the map, zoom in, and just stare at the little dot near a building called the Drift. It feels like spying, but I can't help it. Tonight, I couldn't take it anymore. I walked there. Didn't go inside. Just stood across the street like some washed-out detective in a movie that never got funded. People laughed through the windows. Music I didn't recognize spilled out onto the sidewalk. And then I saw her. She was laughing. She had on that camel-colored coat she only wore on intentional days, job interviews, client meetings, weddings. She was leaning toward someone, not touching, just tilted. Her wine glass dangled from her hand like it had no weight. I didn't recognize the man. He had a face like someone who doesn't need to prove anything. Button-down shirt, rolled sleeves, confident posture, the kind of man who doesn't hesitate when he speaks. She touched his chest, just briefly, just enough to kill something in me. I turned around and walked home. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just walked. I counted my steps and tried not to collapse on the sidewalk. I got home and made toast I didn't eat. And now here I am, sitting in the hallway, staring at a dent in the wall, wondering why she never texted to say she wasn't coming back, wondering if I deserve this for being the guy who never slammed doors. Then something happened. 34 minutes in, a car pulled up outside, headlights off, engine running. I stayed still, and then a shadow passed the frosted glass. Keys jingled, a bag shifted, footsteps on the porch, and for the first time in 12 nights, the doorknob turned. When the door finally opened, I didn't say anything. She stepped inside like she'd just come back from a walk, like 12 days hadn't passed without explanation. She kicked her shoes off gently, dropped her keys into the ceramic bowl by the radiator, same as always, and glanced at me on the floor like I was just there, like I was furniture. Her coat was slightly damp. It was raining again, that silent drizzle that made everything feel like a paused movie. She looked fresh, like someone who'd been taken care of. Her nails were done. Lavender. She never used to paint them. She didn't apologize. Instead, she sighed, walked past me toward the kitchen, and asked, "Did you eat?" I didn't answer. She opened the fridge, scanned it, then made a face. "Why didn't you throw out the curry?" It's basically a science experiment now. 12 days gone. No message. And that's what she opens with. Rotten curry. I should have said something brave. I should have stood up and told her how she broke something inside me that night she disappeared. But I didn't. I sat there like an idiot, knees against my chest, wondering if maybe she was going to pull some surprise explanation out of thin air that would make it all make sense. But she didn't. She just made toast, took a bite, leaned on the counter, and looked at me like I was the one acting weird. Then she said something that made my spine tighten. I was staying with a friend. I needed some space. That's not a crime, Ellis. I stood up slowly. 12 days, and not even a single text. She shrugged. I needed the kind of space where I wasn't expected to explain myself every minute. I didn't think you'd fall apart. I didn't fall apart, Darla. I imploded silently, in slow motion, like a building rigged for demolition with no one watching. Still, I said nothing. She went to the bathroom, closed the door, and started the shower like she lived here, like nothing had cracked open. I stood in the hallway, the steam curling under the door, and tried to figure out what the hell was happening. I I walked past the bathroom and opened the closet. One of her bags was still zipped shut. I pulled it out. Inside, a printed receipt from a boutique hotel downtown. A pair of heels I'd never seen. A black lace bra with the tag still on. And a folded napkin that had handwriting across it. A man's handwriting. Last night made me forget the world existed. I'll be thinking about your eyes until next week. And I sat down on the bed, bag in my lap, and listened to the water running. It sounded like static, like interference, like the soundtrack to the version of my life I never agreed to star in. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, humming something soft, I had the note in my hand. Her eyes landed on it instantly. The humming stopped. She stared at me, blinked twice, said nothing. I held the note out, but I wasn't sure what I wanted her to do. Deny it? Laugh? Cry? Instead, she sat down beside me, wet hair dripping on her shoulders, and whispered, "You were never supposed to see that." That's what broke me. Not the note, not the hotel, that sentence, that tone, that calmness. I asked the quietest question I've ever spoken in my life. Is it still happening? She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She looked away, down, out the window, anywhere but at me. And that's when I realized she was back, but she hadn't returned. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. She didn't ask me to. She didn't tell me not to. She just got under the blanket like everything was fine, pulled it up to her chin, and rolled to the side that used to be mine. She fell asleep in seconds. I could tell by her breathing, deep, even peaceful, like she hadn't left me on red for 12 straight days. Like she hadn't come home with the scent of someone else's cologne hidden under a fake smile. I stayed on the couch, fully dressed, shoes on, hood up. I didn't even brush my teeth. It's strange what happens to your body when your heart gets humiliated, but your brain still pretends you're okay. I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I tried, I saw her in that boutique hotel, standing in front of someone who wasn't me, laughing the way she never did when she was with me anymore. Around 3:40 a.m., I got up and opened her suitcase again. I looked for a second note, another receipt, a sign, something. But all I found was an empty travel-sized perfume bottle and a pair of stockings rolled up so tight it looked like she tried to strangle the guilt out of them. In the morning, she acted like we were back to normal. Made coffee, toasted a bagel. She even put on the old playlist she used to love, Fleetwood Mac, Talking Heads, some obscure acoustic covers of songs no one else remembers. Her eyes met mine once across the room, and she gave me this soft, tired smile like we'd just weathered a rough week together instead of her shattering my trust with 12 days of silence and a stranger's napkin love note. I didn't speak. I nodded, pretended to sip my coffee, and then I told her I had a dentist appointment and left. I didn't have a dentist appointment. I sat in my car for 2 hours in the Walgreens parking lot, staring at a pigeon limping across the asphalt. It had a busted foot, but kept trying to fly anyway. I related to that bird way more than I'd like to admit. Then I did something I didn't plan. I drove to the address on the hotel receipt. It was tucked behind a boutique wine bar, with black window curtains and no signage. The kind of place that tries hard to look low effort. I parked across the street and waited. I didn't know what I was hoping for. To see him? To see them together? To feel something other than this low hum of uselessness in my chest? I waited for nearly an hour. Just before I gave up, I saw someone walk out. Tall, jacket slung over one shoulder. Sunglasses, even though it was overcast. He looked like a magazine ad for disappointment. I didn't take a photo. I didn't follow him. I just sat there, gripping the steering, like it was the only solid thing left in my life. When I got home, she was on the phone. She was sitting on the kitchen counter, twirling the phone cord with her finger, laughing. That soft, guilty kind of laugh. She saw me and turned away like I was a delivery guy who'd walked in at the wrong time. I didn't say a word. I went into the bathroom, turned the faucet on, and stared at myself in the mirror. There's this thing that happens when your mind starts disconnecting from your face, like the person in the reflection is someone else. Someone weaker, smaller, someone who lets things happen to them instead of stopping them. I asked myself a question quietly, under my breath. Why are you still here? And I couldn't come up with a good answer. So I went to bed that night with my shoes on again. Not because I was too tired to take them off, but because I wasn't sure if I wanted to be ready to walk out or ready to run. 2 days later, She invited people over. Just like that. No warning. No, are you okay with this? Just a text while I was at work. Lana and Jules are coming by tonight. Don't be weird. Don't be weird. My wife disappears for 12 days with someone whose initial is in, strolls back and like she forgot her umbrella. And now I'm the one who needs to manage the mood? When I got home, the house already smelled like that overpriced lavender candle she only used when guests were coming over. The cheap wine was decanted like we were suddenly classy again. She even put out the pretzel thins she used to mock me for liking. I stood in the entryway, watching her cut lemon slices into a pitcher like she was hosting a cooking show. Lana and Jules showed up at 7:13 sharp, all teeth and gossip. They didn't even look surprised to see me, which meant she'd told them I was fine or adjusting or some other vague lie. I sat on the arm of the couch and tried to make small talk while Darla poured wine like a magician who couldn't quite hide the trick. Then came the moment that I've played over in my head 100 times since. Lana asked her, "So, how was the retreat?" Darla flinched. Just for a second. A half second, maybe, but it was there. The truth cracking the performance. She smiled too hard and said, "Transformational." That word hung in the room like a wet towel. Lana nodded like she understood. Jules sipped her wine, and I just kept staring at the condensation on my glass. Later, after they left, I confronted her, not with rage, but with the dumbest, softest question a man can ask when he already knows the answer. Was it really a retreat? She was brushing her hair in the mirror. She paused, looked at me through the reflection, and said, "It was a break. From everything, including questions." Then she walked past me and turned off the bedroom light without waiting for me to follow. I stayed in the kitchen, rereading the napkin note I had folded in my hoodie pocket like a sick habit. I finally searched the name of the hotel, scrolling down far enough to find a tagged photo on social media. A blurry shot of the lobby, with someone's arm just barely in frame. The jacket, the same one the man wore when I sat outside and watched him leave. And that's when it hit me. I had seen him before. Not just outside that hotel. Not just as a blur. Months ago, at our dinner party, Darla's friend from a co-working space. Nate. I had made him coffee. We laughed about a movie we both hated. He complimented my record collection. I had fed the man who would later hold my wife in a room I never entered. I stood in the kitchen for hours that night. At one point, I opened the fridge just to close it again. I kept hearing her voice in my head over and over. It was a break. I wanted to scream. I wanted to smash something. But instead, I went outside. I sat on the steps. Cold concrete beneath me. Shoes still on. Then something happened I wasn't ready for. My phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Does she know you've seen us? No name. No context. Just that. I stared at it, heart pounding, stomach twisting. It wasn't signed. It wasn't threatening. It was cautious, like a man trying to figure out how much damage he's done before deciding whether to cause more. I didn't reply. I just sat there, watching the screen dim, the light on the porch flicker, and the truth about my marriage settle into the cracks between the bricks. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the covers, shoes still on, phone clenched in my hand like it could protect me. That message, "Does she know you've seen us?" looped in my mind like a riddle with no punchline. I stared at the ceiling for hours, counting the spaces between the fan blades, hoping the silence would drown out my thoughts. It didn't. The next morning, Darla left early. Said she had a strategy meeting at her freelance workspace. I said nothing, just nodded like a man who doesn't want to hear more lies. As soon as she closed the door, I stood up, grabbed her spare key from the hook near the back window, and left through the alley. I drove across town like my hands weren't even attached to the wheel. I had no plan, just motion. Movement felt like control, and I hadn't had control in a long time. I stopped at a hardware store. The guy didn't ask questions. I handed him her key. He asked, "You want a backup?" I nodded. The machine buzzed for 10 seconds. I handed over a $5 bill and got a shiny copy of her life in return. It felt like betrayal, but I justified it. She had crossed lines I didn't even know existed. Later that afternoon, I drove to the boutique hotel again. Not to watch, not to wait, just to walk inside. The woman at the front desk didn't even blink when I said the name Darla West. She nodded, typed something into her screen, and said, "Oh, yes. She stayed with us last week. Is everything all right?" I said I left the jacket. She told me to wait a moment and disappeared into a room behind the counter. My heart hammered in my chest. I wasn't there for a jacket. I was there for anything. Confirmation. A crack in the story. A trace of him. Of her. Of who they were when I didn't exist. When she came back empty-handed, I thanked her and left. But just as I stepped out, someone called my name. Ellis. I turned, expecting a stranger. But it was him. Nate. No blazer. No sunglasses. Just a hoodie, messy hair, and that same irritating calm in his voice. He stepped closer, slower than he needed to, like he wasn't sure if I'd punch him or cry. Look, man, I didn't know she was still. Still what? Mine? Honest? Real? He raised his hands. She said things were over, that she needed something new. I didn't mean for any of this to get weird. You weren't supposed to. I cut him off. Not with words. Just a look. I don't even know what was on my face, but it shut him up. He nodded. Okay, I get it. You don't want to talk. He turned to leave, and for a moment, I almost let him walk. But something in me, some quiet, bruised part of me, needed to bleed a little more. So I asked, was it just once? He paused. Didn't turn around. Didn't lie either. Depends what you mean by was. Then he left. When I got home, Darla was on the couch with a glass of wine and a face mask on like it was spa night. She didn't ask where I'd been. She never does anymore. She muted the TV when I walked in. And for the first time in our marriage, I didn't sit across from her. I didn't make small talk. I walked straight into the bedroom, opened the drawer beneath my socks, and hid the copy of her key inside a hollow book I bought on Etsy years ago. She never read the titles on my shelf. I wasn't planning anything dramatic. I wasn't trying to catch her. I didn't even know what I wanted. But something inside me was shifting, quietly, like a tide pulling away from shore. And maybe the most terrifying part was this. I didn't want her to leave. I wanted her to beg to stay. But she never did. She just kept living in our house like it was a hotel with no checkout date. It happened by accident. Or maybe it didn't. Maybe deep down I was hoping for it. But that's the problem with betrayal. It makes every moment feel like a setup. Even the innocent ones. She left her laptop open on the dining table. It was late, maybe just past 11 p.m. She'd fallen asleep on the couch, an empty wine glass dangling from her fingertips, her leg twitching now and then like she was running in her dreams. I didn't plan to snoop, but the screen was on, and her inbox was wide open. At first, I just stood behind the chair, staring. Then I sat down. Then I scrolled. There it was, a folder labeled Personal, and she didn't even try to hide it. I clicked, and the air in the room changed. The kind of change you don't feel until your lungs start fighting it. The first email was dated 7 months ago. Still thinking about that time in the elevator. You looked at me like I was something worth ruining. My hands began to tremble, but I couldn't stop. Each message was a piece of the timeline I thought I understood. Turns out I had been months behind. Photos, late-night meet-up plans, inside jokes, a shared Spotify playlist titled Our Little Parallel World. I clicked on it. Track 1 was the song she once told me reminded her of her father. The fact that she shared that song with him felt like theft. Like she pawned our history for a fantasy with better lighting. And then I found the draft. It was half-written, unsent, dated 2 days before she returned home. Ellis doesn't ask. He's like fog. He fills the room without ever noticing if the windows are open. I feel like I'm fading next to him. I know I shouldn't want this, but I do. I want more. I want noise. I want color. I want to wake up with someone who shakes my world instead of keeps it safe. I didn't realize I was crying until a tear hit the touchpad. I closed the laptop. Slowly. Carefully. Like I was handling something dead. She didn't wake up. Not even when I slipped the wine glass from her hand and placed it on the floor beside the couch. I walked outside into the cold night barefoot. The concrete bit into my skin. I didn't care. My mind was racing, but not toward rage. Not even sadness. What I felt was emptiness. Like I'd finally stepped into the truth, and it had no furniture. The next day, I went to work like nothing happened. Smiled at coworkers. Sent emails. Ate a bagel I couldn't taste. I even said, "Have a good one," to Jerry from accounting. But inside, something was changing. That night, she brought up the idea of going on a weekend trip together. Said she found a cabin on a lake. Said she wanted to reconnect. I nodded. Asked her where the cabin was. She said she'd send me the link. She never did. Instead, she packed her overnight bag quietly the next morning. Said she'd go first, get things set up, and I could follow after work. I asked her if she wanted me to bring anything. She paused, then said, "Just bring yourself." I watched her drive away from the front window, her taillights blinking in the early mist. When I turned back into the house, I noticed she had taken the key off her chain, left it on the entryway table. And that's when I realized something that hit harder than any email ever could. She wasn't inviting me. She was testing whether I'd chase her. So I sat down in the armchair by the window and waited. Not for her to come back. Not for a message. But for the silence to tell me what to do next. I told her I'd meet her there after work. I didn't go to work. Instead, I waited exactly 4 hours. Just enough time for her to settle in, light one of those soy candles she always pretended not to care about, pour wine, and feel safe in her lie. Then I got in the car, turned off my phone, and drove. The lake was 2 hours north, winding roads and trees stripped bare by the early frost. I barely remember the drive. Just the white noise of tires and the way my grip on the wheel felt more like clenching than steering. When I pulled in the gravel lot, her car was already there, parked at an angle, the way she always did when she thought no one else would notice. I cut the engine, stepped out, and the first thing I noticed was the smell. Wood smoke, wine, and something else, something faint but sharp like bergamot and cedar. Not hers, his. I didn't knock. I used a copy of the cabin key she left on the table. Maybe unintentionally, maybe not. The lock clicked louder than I expected. The air inside was warm and quiet. There were 2 wine glasses on the counter. One had lipstick on the rim. Hers. The other didn't. There was a jacket draped over the back of the chair. A man's jacket. Expensive. Worn in. Familiar. She wasn't in the kitchen. Not on the porch. Not even in the main room. I walked down the short hallway slowly, listening for voices, footsteps, laughter, anything. Then I heard the faint thud of a drawer closing. The bathroom door creaked. I backed away, quietly, and waited in the living room. She appeared 2 minutes later, startled by my presence, but not enough. Not like someone who'd been caught. More like someone who didn't think I had it in me to show up at all. Her expression was unreadable. Not guilty, not afraid, just tired. "You came," she said flatly, as if we were meeting for coffee. I nodded. "Where is he?" She didn't answer. She walked to the sink, dumped the wine down the drain, and started rinsing the glasses like it mattered. I repeated it, this time louder. "Where is he?" She turned the faucet off, dried her hands, looked me dead in the eye. "He left 20 minutes ago. He was never going to stay the night." I sat down, slowly on the couch. The air was too warm. My throat itched. The fire cracked once, and then went silent, like even it was holding its breath. She sat across from me and crossed her legs. No apology. No excuse. "You knew," she said. "I did," I replied. "So why did you come?" I didn't have an answer then. Not a real one. But now I think I know. Because part of me needed to see it. I needed the physical space. The reality of it. I needed to sit in the room that held their lies and feel the weight of it pressing on my skin. I asked her, "Are you in love with him?" She looked away. Not out of guilt. Out of calculation. "I don't know if I even know what that means anymore," she said. I nodded. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Clarity. I stood up, walked to the fireplace, and pulled a small envelope from my coat pocket. I'd printed out every one of her emails to him. Not out of revenge. Not even to hurt her. Just to show her what she left behind in her own words. I dropped the envelope on the coffee table. "I'm not going to beg you to choose me," I said. She looked at the envelope like it was made of glass. Then she whispered, "I didn't think you'd ever say that." I turned and walked toward the door. My hand was on the knob when she said one more thing. "He doesn't want anything real. He only wanted me because you had me first." I stopped, just for a breath, then opened the door and walked out into the cold. The wind hit hard, but it felt clean. Honest. The first honest thing I'd felt in a long time. I didn't look back at the cabin. Not once. I let the gravel crunch beneath my boots as I walked toward my car. The cold pierced through my coat, but I didn't shiver. There was something pure about it, like the wind was trying to cleanse me on the way out. By the time I reached the city, the sun had set behind the buildings, and everything looked quiet and artificial under streetlights. I parked down the block, walked the last stretch to the apartment, and stood in front of the door for a full minute, key in hand, thinking, what happens if she's already gone? She wasn't. She was sitting at the kitchen table, jacket still on, her phone in her hand, but her eyes unfocused. She looked up when I walked in, and for a moment, we just stared at each other, two strangers who had memorized all the wrong parts of one another. You forgot this, I said, handing her the envelope she left on the cabin table. She took it, looked down, then said something I didn't expect. I'll be leaving in the morning. No drama. No speech. No finalstig. Just that. I nodded. Okay. She paused. Aren't you going to ask where I'm going? I don't need to know anymore. And the strange thing was, I meant it. That night, I didn't sleep on the couch. I didn't sleep in our bed either. I opened the windows, made tea, and sat at the small desk by the radiator. I wrote down everything I'd been holding in for months. Not for her. For me. For the parts of myself I had silenced in the name of keeping the peace. When I heard the door close in the morning, I felt no panic. No regret. Just space. And breath. And light. Over the next few weeks, I started rebuilding in the quiet. I joined a book club. Not because I needed people, but because I needed to hear my own voice in a room again. I called my brother, the one I hadn't seen in years, and invited him to dinner. He said yes. We laughed for hours like we were kids again. I bought a new bedsheet set. Bright blue. Nothing fancy, just mine. I repainted the wall near the thermostat, finally covering the dent from the falling can. It's smooth now. The kind of smooth that comes from effort. And one morning, weeks later, with no warning or plan, I took a different route to work. Passed by a cafe I'd never noticed before. Inside, it smelled like cinnamon and conversation. I went in. She was there. Not Darla. Someone else. Sitting alone, reading a newspaper like it was still 1995. She looked up, caught my glance, and smiled. A real smile. Unassuming. Kind. Present. I don't know what will come of it. I'm not in a hurry to find out. But I sat down. We talked about coffee. And clouds. And how quiet the world feels when you finally stop begging to be heard by the wrong people. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like the man she left behind. I felt like the man I found when she did.